with CFSI, the Center for Financial Services Innovation, based in San Francisco, California. And I'm excited to be here. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So, I'm going to spend a couple of minutes talking a little bit about the market in the United States, some of the challenges that are specific to the United States that I think is probably important to understand the work that we do there, the types of companies that we seek to partner with, our investment strategy, and really what we're looking for from this work under the Financial Solutions Lab. So first, a little bit about CFSI. Stand for the Center for Financial Services Innovation. We've been around for about 15 years now, and are really focused on improving consumer financial health in the United States. And I'll spend a little bit of time talking about what that means. But initially we got started really thinking about how we can extend banking services to people who are not being served by them when we started. And thinking about how we can make our products, financial services products in the United States, better for consumers. And with the financial crisis in 2008, there was a broad realization that that a lot of that work of just getting people more access to product, getting them a home loan, getting them a credit card, getting them the account that they thought they needed, was not enough. Because, as I think everyone here knows, with the financial crisis has led to a lot of problems for our economy. So we really started thinking about how do we think about improving financial health? What is the underlying issue that we actually want the financial services industry to solve for? And that's a problem of consumer outcomes. We want consumers, when they use financial services, to be better off than they were before. So we did a lot of work to try to figure out what that means. So we should start by saying at CFSI, what we do is we principally consider ourselves to lead a network of financial institutions. So there are 130 financial institutions in the CFSI network. They include all the big banks in the United States. So your JP Morgan Chase, Wells Fargo, Bank of America, Citibank. They include subsidiaries of some Japanese banks, like Bank of the West, for example, is one of our network members, which is part of the MUFJ. They include smaller regional banks, and includes big technology companies, things like Google and Amazon, Intuit, that have obviously an interest in serving financial services to their consumers. So that's the CFSI network, is kind of the connect element of what we do. We host conferences, events like this, where we talk about what's working in the industry, what challenges businesses are facing as they're building products and evolving, and really just try to be a hub or a center of knowledge sharing, learning, and education. That second thing we do, inform, that's our research work. So that's trying to identify insights about the market that can help providers create better products. So where are the challenges consumers are facing? What are problems in the payment system? What are problems in the credit markets? And how can banks and financial institutions make their products better? We have our Innovate strategy, which is the third one, which I lead, and I'll talk about that a lot today, so I'll skip it for now. And then our Advise portion, which is consulting. So we're directly with a financial services provider to help them to make their product more effective and efficient. And as I go through this, if you have any questions or if I start speaking too fast and you lose it, just raise your hand and I'm happy to pause. It's just a small group so we can have a conversation. So first, financial health. We define financial health when your daily systems help you to build resilience and pursue opportunities. And so, what does that mean? Resilience, this is insurance, retirement, giving you the financial tools that you need to make sure that you're able to survive the the shocks that are going to come your way in life. Being able to pay for medical bills, things like that. Opportunity. Do you have the opportunities to access the financial services industry to improve your own life? So mortgages to buy a home, loans for school, the ability to, increasingly we look at small business lending, so small businesses can get started and operate. That's the opportunity. And then day-to-day management, we mean just the day-to-day transactions of people's accounts. So there are, payments transactions. Where do you hold your money? How are you storing your funds? Just passing money back and forth, making that as frictionless as possible. And together, when all those work well, the financial services industry is helping to build the financial health of consumers. So this is a little bit different. So when you hear about unbanked or underbanked or financial inclusion in the emerging market context, it's much more about microfinance, maybe extending products and services to very poor people that banking doesn't work for. This is kind of how we think about financial inclusion in a developed market context. And this framework of financial health is increasingly popular amongst U.S. financial institutions to think about the work they're doing. We're getting increasing interest from large European banks to come talk to them about this. The EU, the European Union, has thought about how they can think about their rules and regulations in a way that aligns consumer interest to the banking sector. And as my presence here indicates, and hopefully we're seeing more interest from countries like Japan, other developed economies, where we really want to think about how do we modernize our financial services industry. So early on, about 3 years ago, the first challenge we started thinking about financial health is what is the current state of financial health in the United States? So we did a nationally represented survey of about 7,000 Americans to understand their financial health. And what we found is about 57% of the American households, 138 million Americans, are struggling financially. And that's across the income spectrum. So about 16% of Americans who make more than $100,000 a year have trouble meeting their monthly expenses. So simply being affluent does not mean one's in good financial health. And so, this work, this is one of those research products, helps to inform the industry. We can take this and go deeper with banks, large banks, Wells Fargo or Bank of America have both engaged us to help them understand what is this financial health of their consumers and how can we be building that as we work with them. And then this slide gives you a perspective on the state of the U.S. market. Before I jump into this, it's worth noting a couple of big differences between the U.S. financial services industry and I think really any other developed country. It is highly fragmented in the United States. There are 16,000 regulated banks in the United States. Even the biggest ones, those Bank of America, Wells Fargo, Citibank, JP Morgan Chase, have no more than about 10% of the American deposit base. So it's a highly fragmented banking industry. And it's also regulated at a couple levels. It's regulated at the federal government level and at the individual state level. And in some cases at the municipality, the county level too. So it's a highly regulated, very disparate system. And unlike any other developed country economy, there's no national mandate that banks serve everybody. There's rules preventing discrimination in lending. There's rules ensuring the safety and soundness of the system, but there's no requirement that Citibank offer banking services in a rural area. There's no requirement that anyone offers banking services in some places. So there are many parts of the United States that have no banks, despite the fact there are so many of them. And what that means is there's a huge segment of the population who spend a lot of money on the alternatives to banking. So we estimate that the alternative financial services industry in the United States is about $141 billion a year of fees and interest expenses. So this is essentially what should be profitable for the market. And not all, and this pie chart breaks down kind of what that market looks like. Not all of it probably has direct relevance to the Japanese market. But so long-term credit, this would be subprime loans. So subprime mortgages would fall under these. Credit cards for subprime borrowers, so people below a certain credit score. This would be revolving loans, arguably products like Lending Club, which may be some people here. That's this large startup in the United States. Many of their products probably fall under this long-term credit realm of 2 to 5 year time horizon, 16 to 30% interest rates. Short-term credit is smaller and often a lot more expensive. These are products where a title loan, maybe rent-to-own type of product, where you could be paying a lot of fees for a relatively short-term interest rate. Single payment credit, I'm not sure if they have that in Japan. These are payday loans. This is basically, I'll take a loan out today and I pay it back on Friday. Maybe I borrow $250 today and on Friday I'll pay back $300. This is a huge market in the United States. It's essentially a liquidity product, not really a credit product. Your life isn't going to change too much in 3 days, 4 days, but it helps people to bridge a very short-term challenge. And then payments and deposit accounts. I don't think this probably has as much. This might not have a natural analogy in Japan, but this is your payments products and ways of buying stuff, transferring money back and forth. So we probably put PayPal in that category. Venmo's product, a lot of what Alipay, those types of products that you're now seeing some incursions into the United States market would fall under that as well. For the most part, those products are solving a problem that many Americans don't have great payment tools. So the last background slide I wanted to cover was around how we think about quality. So I've talked a lot about the problems facing the U.S. market, maybe the size of the market, the size of the opportunity. But if we want to change the market, we need to have a good sense of what is a quality financial product. And our compass principles help us to provide that guide. This is a principle-based approach. It's not definitive, but basically 4 components. Is it inclusive? Is it open to everybody? Does it build trust? So we don't want products that are predatory, where it looks like a great deal when you sign up, but then there's some scheme on the back end that you get someone a lot of fees. Does it promote the success of the consumer? A great example of this is just a traditional mortgage. You're able to borrow a lot of money and pay it back over a very long period of time. That allows people to buy a home. Otherwise, you'd have to save for a very, very long period of time. And you wouldn't have people owning homes. So that's a product that helps promote the success of the consumer. And then does it create opportunity? Now, this is a big issue in products like student lending, where by getting a good education, you can really improve your earning potential. So you want to see products there that are aligning that goal with the long-term goals of the consumer. So I can pause. I just want to get any questions on kind of CFSI and how we think about the world, and then I can kind of shift a little bit more to the tech part of the discussion.
テクノロジーの方に話が変わりつつありますが、なんか質問があればどうぞこの段階で。よろしいですか。
So, as I said it in the beginning, we have 4 types of work we do. We lead the network, we have our consulting work, we do a lot of research, and then we have our innovation work. I'm responsible for our innovation work. This is a chart that breaks down kind of how we think about the innovation life cycle in the United States. I'm going to take this off so I can move a little bit. I'm sorry for the small print. But you know, this little red line is basically a sense of a really successful company's growth trajectory. And this is kind of what the business, the maturity stage of the business looks like. Kind of what's happening in the underlying business. So early on, you know, you're kind of thinking of what what your ideas are. And then maybe you're starting to incubate, starting to create a product. You can kind of see a little bit, this is design, ideation, product concepts, pilot testing. And this is all kind of what you do before you would go get investors. And then venture capital tends to come in once you have a product, typically. And that's really focused on getting that product to a broader market and improving the efficiency of the business that supports the product. And ultimately helping that company take that product to scale. And then, you know, as they go on, companies become more stable companies and you don't really worry about what's on the end of that chart so much. And this little line down here is a little bit about what you're trying to do if you want to support the ecosystem. So early on, you're just trying to find ideas. You're discovering what's in the market. And then you have your evaluation where you're trying to figure out like which of these is going to be successful. And so you can look at things like the growth of the company, the number of users, the strength of the team, trying to get a sense of what ideas are we going to take. And then finally, you're really focused on execution and developing a business. And this bottom one gives a sense of who pays for this. But who are the investors in this process? So early on, when it's just an idea, it's mostly friends and family. This is not really where institutional investors participate. Then you'll have your seed investors. I know my friend Sheil Mohit is speaking here, I think tomorrow or next day, from 500 Startups. So they're a great example of a seed investor. And as Sheil, I think, would talk about, a lot of what they're doing is looking for ideas. You know, they're looking for businesses, and they're trying to kind of help investors evaluate. That's really where they sit. And then after those, we'll go to your Series A investors. That's probably closest to where I am in the market. We don't do traditional Series A, but our metrics are similar for what we're looking for. Where you want to see something in the market, and you're making the first major investments of capital to help build out the team for them to be successful. And then you run into these Series A, B, C. This is just a shorthand for kind of the size of the capital that's invested and kind of where they are in the cycle. So that will be growth investors and larger pools of capital that will come into businesses that are further along. And you know, the metrics that a business looks at, they start to evolve too, that an investor looks at. So early on, it's a little bit, you're kind of just guessing a little bit, frankly. You have some ideas of what you think are getting successful. You have a vision of products you want to see in the market. But as they get further along, you can look at traditional valuation models. You can look at how much they're generating revenue. You can start to put a more market-based valuation on companies, and the investors on the bottom tend to be more sophisticated financially than the investors who are on this side of it, who focus more on finding companies. So CFSI had done a number of things. So this is the exact same charts above. So it's the same thing I just talked about. CFSI had done a number of these things over the previous 12, 13 years before I joined the organization. We had run some hackathons. So really early, kind of getting teams together to kind of iterate on ideas. We had run a couple business model competitions. So again, you have a team then, and you're looking at, these are like pitch competitions. I think that the pitch competition that this conference has on Friday is probably similar to that. You're getting an award for something that you think is doing a good job. We spun out a venture capital firm at one point called Core Innovation Capital. They're now on their second fund, and they're in the same space of investing in financial inclusion ideas. They're more of a traditional Series A, Series B investor. And then we have our network, which I mentioned at the beginning, which are generally large, mostly public companies who are focused on these businesses. They're really only going to invest in pretty late stuff, or if they want a team, they're looking for business partnerships. They want ideas that can work at scale. And scale in the United States, I think probably starts in financial services at least 1 million customers. So there's a lot of customers. Most of the businesses we operate with are about 100,000 customers. And so when we were thinking about how we can support the ecosystem, we looked kind of broadly at all that was out there. And there were a lot of things focused on very early stage stuff. A lot of business plan competitions, hackathons, seed programs, accelerators, a lot of activity. And then we had a lot of stuff much later on the corporate innovation functions. So you do just your general corp dev, or like the strategic investments group of a large bank. For example, SoftBank would be the fifth normal example of a really large one. So there's a lot of capital much later on, but not a lot in this space. And in financial services, this is really problematic because it's a very highly regulated industry. And so a lot of businesses that serve consumers were never getting very far. They would do really well and kind of come out, but then they would run into legal questions, regulatory issues, and we just didn't see the type of innovation in the market that we wanted. And so we partnered with JP Chase to launch the Financial Solutions Lab. So this is a 5-year, $30 million effort. And every year we identify a challenge facing American consumers and ask entrepreneurs to apply for the program. We receive about 300 to 400 applications a year from companies. So we receive a little over 1,000 applications so far for the program. And what we really focus on is taking companies that have a product in market. So they're kind of toward the left-hand side of the growth curve, and helping them get that product to, if we think about getting them from 100,000 users or 10,000 users to 1 million, that's kind of where we want to do. We want to help companies grow very quickly. And we have a number of resource partners we brought in who can help them do that. So IDEO is a design firm. I know they're active here in Japan, some of you may have heard of them. Ideas 42 is a behavioral economics firm, so they're able to take behavioral insights and behavioral psychology and apply them to consumer challenges. So how do you make a product easier for a consumer to sign up for? How do you make it more likely that a consumer pays a loan back on time? That's the kind of stuff that Ideas 42 works on. Amazon and Google, I'm sure everyone in this room is familiar with them. The bottom list gives a sense of the complexity of the US regulatory market. All of those organizations are either lawyers, regulatory consultants, or data service providers. So we're able to help companies get access to a lot of what are generally very expensive services by partnering with some more specialized partners. So we'll bring the companies in, and we provide them each with $250,000. For most of the companies, it's an investment. We give them access to the expertise at CFSI and JP Chase, and through our other network members. So generally very senior level connections to large financial institutions. So if someone needs an introduction to someone at Bank of the West, for example, we're able to find that right person there and put them in touch with them. So there's a pretty broad mentor network too that we've helped develop. And finally, at the bottom, really focus on exposing them to industry leaders and the regulatory community. So last week I was actually in Washington, D.C., and with our companies there, and we took them to Congress, our legislative body, and introduced them to congressional staff members who are focused on financial services. We did a session with all the regulatory and law enforcement bodies in the United States who regulate financial services, so that the companies could introduce themselves and we could help facilitate some of the conversations they need. And then we bring together a number of other consumer groups to introduce them to the companies as well. So we're able to really raise the profile of these companies by bringing them into the program. Slide gives a sense of what the program looks like. So it's a combination of in-person and virtual meetings that happen. So the in-person meetings that initially the first one is in San Francisco, and is focused on introducing the companies to each other and to CFSI. We do something called FinX, which is an experiential learning program where we take the companies out into the market and have them use the alternative financial services industry. So many of these businesses that on that first slide, the $141 billion market, are storefront businesses where you can go in and get a loan. You can buy a payment card. The system doesn't work very well, and so it's a great opportunity for our founders and CEOs to really see the challenges that many Americans face in managing their money. And then we introduce them to our partners. Our second meeting is really about helping the companies get to know each other. So we just have them in a room in a nice place. Jackson is a beautiful town in Wyoming, where they can get to know each other and learn from their individual strengths and weaknesses. We'll then take them to CFSI's Network Summit, which is in about 2 weeks, which will give them an opportunity to connect with that broader network of financial services providers. And so we get some great partnerships that have come out of that meeting, where we can help get them in front of the right organization to maybe offer their product to their customers or to their employees, and really help them to kind of accelerate their growth. And then in November we'll take them to New York, DC, again, and introduce them to government officials, regulators, and then we'll go meet senior executives at JP Morgan Chase. And so there we'll get usually buy-in from the CEO, Jamie Dimon, and his direct reports will often come to that meeting and will really help the companies if they're thinking about partnering with JP Morgan Chase, or really just tap into the expertise of that financial institution. And then towards the end of the program, we'll help them connect to investors and get ready to continue growing after the program's over. The program doesn't really end at the end of this. We continue to stay engaged with our companies for a long period of time afterwards. I still talk to most of our founders from our first class once a week. So we're pretty active investors in that sense. On the virtual side, we've got a pretty broad mentor network that we put together. So at JP Morgan Chase, they get about 1,000 applications to be mentors to lab companies. There's only about 80 a year, so it gives you a sense of the competition there. And we'll be checking in with them pretty frequently. We'll work with them on consulting engagements, ourselves and our partners, to work on specific issues that the companies might be facing. So, helping them to think about how to make a product better, helping them think about a sales strategy, really a whole host of issues that we'll engage with them on. And then we really try to facilitate communication within the cohort. These are some pretty impressive companies, and so we want the founders of the companies to know each other and know how they operate.
お互いに役立ち
So I can pause there and see if there's any questions about the program and about our approach, and then I can kind of spend some time diving into the individual companies we
何か
work
質問
with.
があればお届けします。でなければこれらの私たちが支援している教師と一つについていくつかお話をしていきたいと思いますが、どうでしょうか。
質問がありましたらぜひマイクをよろしくお願いしますので、おそらく非常に速いスピードで進んでいますし、なかなかキャッチアップが難しいところがいかがでしょう。よろしいですか。はい、もちろん。
This is a translator.
小関と申します。明治大学の小関と申します。お話ありがとうございます。ライアンさんが支援されているスタートアップ企業がやっておられる事業の概要についてどんなスタートアップ企業があるのか2、3例を挙げていただければありがたいです。
Sure. Well, that leads to a great transition. So we're on to our, we've done 3 cohorts of companies. So, and I mentioned at the top that each of our we call them cohorts. This means class. This is another name for our class. Each year we identify a challenge facing American consumers. And we try to make it really simple for people to understand. We're trying to communicate to entrepreneurs who might not be really close to these issues. They might not have any familiarity with financial inclusion or financial health. So we want to make it really obvious the problem and what we're looking for. So the first year, 2015, our challenge was about short-term liquidity. So I mentioned payday loans at the beginning. So if you maybe get paid on Friday and you have a bill due today, and you don't have any money in your bank account, you have very bad options in the United States. And so we wanted to see solutions to solve that problem. It's a problem that there's about $40 billion a year spent on payday loans. About 115 million Americans take them. So more than a third of the American population is taking these products each year. And some people are taking multiple loans at a time. So that's that first challenge. And we picked 9 companies who we thought were solving that problem. And I can just call out a few of them that are probably interesting to this audience. Digit is probably our most well-known company at this point. It's an automated savings application, and what you do is you link your bank account to Digit, and Digit sends you a text every day that tells you how much money you have in your account, and then it looks for money in your account that you might not miss, and it sweeps it out of your account and sets it aside in a Digit savings account. And it's all over text. It was probably one of the very first, like, in the United States, messaging type of platforms. It was really just, there was not an app, it was only a text message product. And by kind of taking the complexity of savings away from the consumer, they save a lot of money. Digit so far saved about $500 million for consumers. And on average by about $70, $80 a month at a time. And they're now saving for hundreds of thousands of Americans are using the product. So that gives you a sense of kind of how we like to see a problem where we have an entrepreneur who came up with a really elegant way of kind of taking the complexity of savings away from consumers and making it very approachable. The texts are very friendly, they're very conversational, it's like you're texting with a friend. So that's one of the companies in that cohort. Another one is even, and I'm sure this problem exists in Japan as well, but for many Americans they get paid very erratically. So if you might work 40 hours one
例え
week.
ば1週間は
If you work here
40
at
時間
Starbucks
仕
and
事し
you're
た
you
例え
maybe
ば
work
アルバイ
at
トとかやってる
a coffee shop or something,
ス
you
タ
might
ーバッ
work
クスとか
40 hours one week, and let's
1週
say
間
you
は
get paid
40時間働いたと
$700 that week.
700ドルだから
And then
そ
the
の
next
週
week,
は入った
you only get 20
次の
hours.
週は20しか
And so you only get paid $300.
300ドルしか
That volatility in income makes it very difficult to manage your financial
まあ
life.
所得の上下
What
動
it
が
even
激しい
does is
場合
just gives you a consistent $500 paycheck. So it just averages it. It's really simple, but it's very complicated from a regulatory standpoint to do that. And by smoothing people's income, some of their users are saving about $2,000 a year simply by smoothing out the income, not getting any more money, but just getting the money in an easier to manage type of way.
その方がずっとお金の管理がしやすくなると。
Another company is
他
Propel.
の企業としては例えばプロペルなんかもいい。
We were the very first
で私どもは
investors in this company. They were very early.
最初に
One
投資した
guy,
会社のところです。
and they were trying to make
で
one of our social safety net programs in the United States. Basically gives people money for food. It's called food
フー
stamps.
ドスタンプという形で
And it's a very difficult program to work with. It's very complicated. You have to go to a government office, sign up for it, wait in line.
事務所に行って
People drop out of the program all the time because they can't fill out the forms.
まあ
It's kind of designed to be complicated.
列に並んでそして
And Propel made it very easy for people to sign up for this program.
結構多いんです。でこれを簡単に
So when they joined the program, they had about 12 customers, and now they have probably about close to about 10% of the American food stamp population is using this product. So several, nearly a million people. Andreessen Horowitz, which is a big, major venture capital investor, recently invested in that company. And another one that might be worth flagging on this is a company called Prism. And this is a bill payment product. So it just basically makes it easier to pay your bills. It automates your bill selection, finds the right time to pay a bill for you, and allows you to very elegantly make the payment. This company was actually acquired during the program by another larger company called Pay Near Me. And what's interesting about these two, both Digit and Prism, is they're both kind of two approaches to kind of the same problem. So Digit's kind of helping you save, Prism's helping you pay bills. And when they both launched, Digit would say, hey, it looks like I can save $5 for you. Do you want me to save? And the first time they sent that message, somebody would text back yes. And then the second time they sent that message, the person would just ignore them. And then the third time they sent the message, they would just delete the app. And the founder would reach out and say, why'd you close the product? Why'd you quit the product? And they said, well, don't ask me. Just do it for me. People wanted the complexity to be taken away. Prism is a bill payment product. When the founder built that product, they assumed that people would want to automate it. You'd want to have it just pay all your bills for you, not have to worry at all, just do it. And people hated the product. They said they complained, they had no growth, it was a total failure. And then they started sending people the message of, this bill is due, do you want me to pay it for you? And they would text back yes, and they would took off. So it's a little, those are the types of insights we want to look for in our companies, where people want control over their expenses. They want to be the decision maker. They want agency over that transaction. But for something they see themselves as having trouble doing, like saving, they want someone to take care of it for them. Our next class, 2016 class of companies, was focused on building long-term resilience. So helping people save for retirement, plan for medical expenses. Medical expenses are a big deal in the United States. We have a very bad healthcare system that leaves a lot of people it's kind of a disaster. And so, that's an example of something that drives huge numbers of Americans into bankruptcy. So we're looking for those products, like we wanted products to help people think longer term. So this year was really focused on the short term, this week, this month. 2016, we were looking for products that were focused on, 5 years, 10 years, 50 years down the line. And a couple of companies that are worth calling out in that class. So one was Remedy. This was a product that helped you negotiate medical bills and help people try to avoid medical debt. That was actually one of our first failures of a business. So it actually did not succeed. It turns out the healthcare system is more complicated than we thought. Another company next to it, EarnUp. They're still active and still growing. They're quite successful. And they're focused on helping people. They basically, similar to kind of what Prism did in the bill pay, but really help them to optimize their debt payments. So if you pay a little bit extra each month for some types of debt, you can save a lot of money over the long term. Like a mortgage or something, where you're reducing how much you're accumulating interest on. It can be a huge savings. EarnUp tries to figure out how to optimize your payments to reduce your debt load. So it's a really interesting product there. Earn is actually a nonprofit, so they're a charity. So we work with nonprofits and for-profits. And Earn is kind of like Digit, but for much poorer people. So Earn will actually pay you to start saving. They have a matched savings program. And so if you save $50, they'll match it by $50. And it helps to get people with very little savings started. 46% of Americans do not have $400 in savings. So nearly half the population in the United States does not have $400 in savings. And what Earn is trying to do is to get people that savings. And that's a great example of kind of that partnership and collaboration within the classes of companies. So Earn had been around for about 20 years. And in that 20 years, they had about 1,000 accounts. And in the 8 months of the program, they grew that to 35,000. So you had a 35x growth in the number of accounts on that platform during the lab experience through a partnership that they launched with Propel. Because if you remember, this was helping people sign up for a social safety net program. Well, all of these people are poor. And they're all potential customers for Earn. And so Earn would sign people and Propel up and you'll really see some significant growth. That's now, it used to be a Bay Area based nonprofit. So this is 18 months ago. They're Bay Area, they were based in San Francisco. And now they're national, and they're growing at a really, really fast pace by thinking about how they can integrate technology into their operations. Another company I think that's interesting here is a company called Scratch. So Scratch is trying to build a loan servicer. Most loan, like if you have an account from an American bank, you have an American Express card, that is not being served. That is when you pay your payment at the end of the month to American Express, you're not sending that to the American Express Corporation in New York City. There's a servicer that American Express has hired here in Japan, who's going to manage the call center, who's going to take the payments, who's going to figure out where it goes, and send money to investors. There's these servicers that operate in the background of our financial services industry, and they're some of the most inefficient businesses on earth. They make very little money. They're very paper-based. They're very local. Obviously, the rules on collecting an American Express debt in Tokyo are quite a bit different than they are in San Francisco. So American Express needs a servicer in San Francisco, and they need a servicer in Tokyo. And it's kind of a nightmare. So what Scratch is trying to do, it's a bunch of engineers from Pinterest and Dropbox, which are some very successful tech companies, who are trying to rebuild servicing from the ground up. And they actually use blockchain technology to keep track of all these details. So while me and one of you both might have an American Express card, the environment that we're using those cards in is quite a bit different. So instead of having two totally different companies managing us, two totally different accounts and keeping track of all this back and forth, they can have a company like Scratch can come in there and try to optimize all of that and have centralized record keeping. And by using technology to build this in 2017 versus 1980, which is when the servicing industry really got started, they're able to drive a lot of efficiencies out of it. And why we like that product is a servicer is who you engage with for most of your lending products. And so if you can make that a better experience, you can do a lot to improve the consumer outcomes that someone has in their life. And then the last company I'll mention in this course is a company called Albert, which is kind of like a personal financial management app. But instead of telling you how much money you have in your accounts and how much money your bills and expenses are, it presents all your information as a financial health score. So, if you have, say, $5,000 in your checking account and you have zero debt, maybe your financial health score is 90. And if you've got $0 in your checking account and $5,000 of debt, maybe your financial health score is 40. And by giving people something that they can target and they can focus on improving, they're able to align their incentives as a provider with the incentives of the consumers they're working with. So that's exactly the types of products that we want to see at CFSI. Quick kind of overview on kind of our impact. So those two classes together, when they joined the program, were serving about 140,000 consumers. They're now serving about 1.4 million Americans. So that's a 10x improvement across the cohort. Those 16 companies, 18 companies have raised over $140 million of follow-on capital. So we deployed 4 million total. And they've raised 140 million since then. So it gives you a sense of the role that we can play in making these businesses less risky for investors. To give a sense of all those being our investor base, our most, our biggest co-investors, so people who have followed in lab companies. Most active ones are Andreessen Horowitz, Index, General Catalyst, and Ribbit Capital, which is a fintech-focused large fund. So we get very good engagement from large commercial venture firms, and out of their firms, we have. We don't really track kind of like what their overall valuation is, but I think we see some pretty significant gains in the companies, on the investments. Where we really focus though is on the consumer impact. Like that's where we're really trying to drive towards. So, I mentioned before, Digit saved $500 million for customers since launch. A company called LendStreet, which I didn't touch on. It's probably like a little bit too in the weeds for trying to translate their story to Japan, but it's a debt settlement product, and they reduce how much debt someone who has a lot of debt, someone who's in deep trouble with creditors, they help to settle that debt with the creditors and help someone rebuild their credit life. And so we've seen them have a lot of success in reducing that and really improving their credit score. EarnUp, that I mentioned, that payment platform where they kind of optimize your payments for you. Almost all of their users, effectively all of their users, are prepaying their loans, reducing their loan term by 4.5 years. So, that shows you that with the right tools, people can really get a lot of control over their financial life. And wise banding, which I didn't mention as well, that was on our previous slide. It's a robo-advisor. So they automate financial planning and helping you invest. So there's some, I don't know if people heard of Betterment, maybe it's one of the biggest one in this space. Wise Banyan really focuses on helping you kind of save for a home or save for a car or save for an emergency fund. So 65% of their users are starting to set aside money for an emergency. So I mentioned at the top, 46% of Americans don't have $400 for a case of emergency. Nearly 60% of Americans couldn't come up with $2,000 without selling something or borrowing from friends and family. So there's a lot of Americans who are living very close to the edge. So a product like Wise Banyan really helps them to start building for the long term. So we are on our third class right now. And this year we shifted the program a bit to really focus on more broadly just any product that can help people improve their financial health. One of the things that we found as we did these competitions, we got really good growth. Applicants grew each year. We were really happy. We found that a lot of our, and this is maybe worth thinking about for those of you who are investors or who are thinking about how to encourage innovation in your work, is that by having a narrow topic, by saying, hey, we want to solve problems for short-term liquidity, or we want to solve problems for long-term retirement, is we had companies that would say, well, I don't do that. I'm not really, that's not what I work on. And oftentimes the companies had really great products. But by putting a box on it, we found that many companies were like, well, I don't fit in that box, it's not worth my time. And I think going back to that slide at the very beginning about discovery, a lot of my work is finding new companies. Like, I don't want companies who are going to say no. So this year we broadened the challenge. Anything that helps improve consumer financial health, we wanted them to apply. And the other thing we did is we get a lot of media attention for this challenge each year. So we get really good attention in the press, get good write-ups about it. It helps to raise awareness more broadly in industry. So we focused our challenge this year on groups in the United States that are underserved. So aging Americans, communities of color. So African American people, people from Latino, or so the Americas, South of the United States, immigrant communities, products that we're thinking about women. So there's a pretty extreme gender wealth gap in the United States, where men have a lot more assets generally than women do. So we wanted to help products help solve that problem. So we used our challenge to try to drive awareness about some of these bigger social issues. Another one of those issues around accessibility. So if you think about many technology products that are really good. So Uber is a great example. These are accessible products. And that means that somebody who has like a vision impairment or a hearing impairment can use it. What accessibility tends to do is lead to very clean and very universalizable design. So, if when Uber designs their product to be accessible in the United States, it allows them to roll that product out globally much easier than if it was just built to kind of serve a very small, narrow niche. So we want to see more products that were serving accessible, that were accessible or designed to be approachable by a broader percentage population. And so that's how we kind of framed the challenge. I've kind of walked through some of these numbers already earlier on. But then this is this year's class of companies that we're working with. I think a couple that might be interesting for this audience.
皆さんも関心が
So one is called blueprint income.
ブループリントインカムというのがあります。
So about 30 years ago, many employers in the United States offered pensions, which I know are still somewhat common here in Japan. They are not common in the United States anymore. We do not have many employers who offer pensions.
あまりもう年金を
But that means that many people
なくなってきました。
are woeful, are very underprepared for retirement. They don't have the savings they need. They're going to have they have very limited income to pay for their bills. And so what blueprint income is trying to do is basically use an annuity, which I know is still probably a more common product here in Japan than it is in the United States, to give people an opportunity to buy income in retirement. And what they do is do this as a subscription. So every month you can buy a little bit of an annuity, a small annuity every month. And hopefully every 20 years, you'll save that you'll build up enough that you can be able to retire into income. So it's a way of getting people controlling it over trying to buy themselves a pension.
まあ年金を用意しているようなものです。
Another company that
それから
is worth
利用で
gives you a sense a little bit about how we think about growth
例えば
in our companies.
企業の成長
is
というのを
token transit.
どう考えているのかという
So token transit is not a financial services product.
これは金融サービスの
This is a
ではない
transit product.
トランジット
It's
ということで交通
it's basically it's like what's the transit card? Paseo?
日本で
Passmo? It's like an electronic Passmo card,
パスモのようなスイカのような
which in the United States,
アメリカでは
very few transit agencies are going to invest in a Passmo card.
まあパスモのようなカード
In San Francisco, where I live, we have a Clipper card.
サンフランシスコでは
New York, there's something like that. Washington, big cities with millions and millions of people. Yes. But most people in the United States live in very small cities or rural areas, and they are never going to build an app. They're never going to invest in a Passmo card. And for people who are using transportation in more rural areas or in smaller cities, they're often very poor. Many Americans have cars. And so if you were relying on the bus to get to work in a city like Reno, Nevada, or Bakersfield, you're probably very poor. And so what the team at Token Transit did is they, I don't know, you can go to 7-Eleven and probably buy a Passmo card, right? Or something. Well, in the United States, you can go buy a transit pass at a lot of convenience stores. And there's a system where the transit agencies understand that, and they give you a little commission for selling these. But it's really small. Well, what Token Transit did is they created an electronic version of this. It's just a little app. It's very easy, simple to display. And they sell them online. And because they're selling it online, they're able to do things, they have this product which, for people who use it, is saving them a lot of time. They no longer have to go down to a central place to buy a bus pass. And when they get on a bus, they walk in, they show their phone to a bus driver in front of 50 other potential customers who are on the bus. And the transit agency is really happy that someone built an app for their transit company, their transit agency. And so they'll even advertise Token Transit's products on the back of bus passes. So they literally have the transit agency advertising this company's products to their consumers. And so this company grows very, very fast. This came out of Y Combinator earlier this year, which is a big accelerator, probably people have heard of it. And what we are interested in Token Transit is because they're basically they're getting paid to acquire users. They're getting paid to acquire users who are in deep need of a better financial product that the system doesn't work for, and they grow very quickly. And so what we try to do is get that company to create financial products that leverage that dynamic. So we want them to develop a payment card. We want them to develop a way of giving people more control over how they pay their bills. And so those are the types of products where we have an alignment between our social interest and the commercial interest of an investor. And the last, I think maybe the last one I'd mention here is a company called EverSafe. So as people age, they're very at risk of financial crimes. So if someone, I don't know, maybe your grandparents or your parents, they don't have the same mental acumen that they may have earlier when they were younger, but they don't necessarily want their children or their grandchildren knowing everything about their money. And what happens oftentimes is people take advantage of that. And so it's called elder abuse. It is a very common financial crime in the United States. I'm sure it unfortunately happens in Japan as well. And what EverSafe does is they have created it's basically text message alerts that you set up a network of people that you're going to share information about. So maybe I just share with you when I open up a new credit card. I'll share with you my daily balance of each day. And I can share with somebody else, if there's a fraudulent activity. And I create this web of people who are kind of looking out for my financial life. I'm still in control, but now I have actual people who love me, who care about me, who can help me to kind of stay on top of it. And so this product is really interesting because, we see a lot. This is a great example of when we work with larger financial institutions, they want to offer this to their customers. They want to be able to go to their wealth management customers and say, hey, here's this product that you can help. Because they don't want their customers getting all their money stolen from them either. Nobody has an interest in that. And so they offer EverSafe, and EverSafe is able then to build this kind of very viral network where maybe my grandma gets put on EverSafe, and then my parents find out about it, and so then they might use it, and then I might use it. There's really no reason why it has to be an old person that uses it. A young person can use it too. Everyone. There was just a massive data breach a couple weeks ago in the United States. So there's all sorts of opportunities to have people kind of look out for fraud on your account. And so that's an example of where we work to connect a company to larger providers who can help them scale. And also where there's a product that might seem like it's something for a more affluent consumer group, but has obviously a lot of applicability to a lot more people who might not be in such a strong financial position. So I'm happy to go through other companies and provide kind of more examples of who we've worked for, of who we worked with, the types of companies that we partner with, but also happy to open up to questions and any clarifications that I can provide.
はい、ではここまでで、またちょっと質問とかございましたら、手を挙げていただいてお名前を言っていただければと思います。できましたらお差し支えない範囲でお名前と所属を教えていただければ。すみません、日本で。PTS コンサルティングジャパンで参加します。今日素晴らしい話で、大丈夫かいい話を聞かせていただきましたので、ちょっと一つだけというよりも、昨日から実はこのフィンテックに来て、フィンテックのワークショップに来ていて、昨日の資産管理、資産運用、資産形成というのが、フィンテックというのはどういうふうに組むかということがテーマになった、セッションがありました。で今日の話で僕は実は一番聞いてて非常に興味があるのが、先ほどのいくつかのスライドの中で出てたんですけども、少なくても、このファインラボというところが25万ドルを資産形成することが一つのそのウィナーであるようなページがあったような気がします。 で昨日も実はあって、じゃあ日本ってどうなので、日本ってそもそも先ほどアメリカとは、社会福祉制度も違います。それから当然税制も違うし、それから一体そもそもいくらのお金を形成するべきなのかという考え方、目標値だとか、これはもともとこのさっきのフィンラボ、ごめんなさい、質問なんで、フィンラボで一番初めのところのご説明にあった、じゃあいくらのお金がない人がなんていうか、社会的な排除された人間なのかみたいな、つまり額としての目標額みたいなところが決まらないと、一体どれだけの要するに手間をかけてお金を増やすべきなのか、あるいは今は我慢するべきなのか、なかなか分かりづらい。で、たまたま25万ドルというようなお話が出た、25万ドルだったんですが、っていうのは、どういうモデルケースで、どういう前提条件で25万ドルだと無理なのかっていうような考え方になるのかっていうのはとっても興味があったので聞いていたところなんです。すみません。Excuse me. Maybe it's better for me to answer this question because this is just a misunderstanding. すみません。ですね。25万ドルというのは、CFSI のこのフィンラボというのが、毎年スタートアップ金融包摂をフィンテックを通じて、金融包摂を目指すスタートアップを、セレクションしまして、年間25万ドルの資金を与える。そうなんです。2500万以上ですよね。すごいお金なので、要するにそれでそのスタートアップ企業に資金を出して、でかつ先ほど紹介されたようなさまざまなテクニカルサポート、という、ことをしているという説明なんです。でも他方で今のご質問というのは非常に重要で、ではそのフィンラボが、今アンダーサーブド、コミュニティという言い方を、アンダーサーブドマーケットという言い方をしていますけれども、低所得者マーケットで、実際ですね、今日お話がありましたように400ドルの貯金がない、仮に急に2000ドル、日本で20万円ですね、20万円の急の出費、これからは当然あるわけですよ。子供が大学に入る、子供が学校に入る、ちょっと病気になって収入がない。でところがその20万ドルを20万円を支払うことができずに、結局小売菓子でお金を借りたりとか、自分のものを売ってしまったりとかいうような人たちをサポートする。じゃあおそらく今のご質問というのは、どのようなターゲットを金融包摂の対象として CFSI は考えておられるのかという質問だとすると、これは非常にいいご質問だと思いますので、そこはぜひダイヤに、回答していただければと思います。ごめん。
Yeah, so that's I think there's actually a couple of pretty good questions in there. So one, CFSI is very unique in the United States that we do not work directly with consumers. We work with providers who work with consumers. So our target is banks, it's fintech companies, it's investors. We're trying to support the ecosystem and help those organizations who are working with consumers do a better job. So I think there's just one clarifying point. We're a little more like an umbrella organization than maybe a direct service provider. To your question around kind of, and also, so I should say, as part of our focus, it's not necessarily as productive to accomplish our goals, to try to just have products help poor people. Poor people don't have any money. And banks make money by lending money, holding money, sending money. So people that don't have any money are not a great audience, right? And I think, we are aware of that. And so what we're trying to do is say, hey, this isn't just a problem of poor people. This is a problem of all people. Our financial system in the United States doesn't work very well for a huge number of people. And that's a different story for a bank. That's not just a story of somebody that has $20,000 that can't, $20,000 a year of income and really isn't going to have a lot of savings and is really scraping by. That's a story of someone who has $100,000 of income and isn't qualifying for loans. It's using payday loan products, that doesn't have any insurance, that isn't adequately prepared for their future. And I think that second group of people, that resonates a lot more with banks. It's interesting. So this probably is going to. I'm concerned that this example is going to be hard to translate to Japan. But there's a company called Dave.com in our current cohort. Dave.com. So in the United States, if you spend more money in your checking account than you have, so if it goes below zero, the bank will still make the payment for you, and they'll charge you about a $35 fee. It's called overdraft fee. And overdraft fees are one of the drivers of profitability of banks in the United States. Huge numbers, $20-30 billion a year in overdraft fees. And these things are basically pure profit. And banks, they say customers want them to pay the bills, and this is a very contentious debate in the United States. And what Dave.com does is Dave.com tries to predict when you're going to have an overdraft, and they advance you just enough money so that your account doesn't go below zero. It's usually $30 to $70, and that's it. And they charge you a subscription fee, and you tip them. They don't even charge for the advance. You just tip them whatever you feel. So if you thought that it was great, you give them $5. If you thought it was not great, you don't give them anything. And this company started about 3 months ago. It's growing at an incredible pace right now. So you already picked up kind of tens of thousands of users. They're very strong investors. And last week I was in New York, and I was presenting with the guys from Dave.com to a room full of bankers in New York. And we got done, and one of the audio-visual guys, a worker at the conference center, pulled the CEO of Dave.com aside and said, "Man, that's dangerous talking about overdraft fees in New York. There's a lot of people out there who aren't going to like what you're saying." And he was joking, but it's true. And that, I think, is a little bit of the complexity. So this isn't just a situation where you're really trying to solve products that, we're not just looking out for poor people. You're looking out for products that are better for consumers than the current market. I think that that's one thing that while financial inclusion or financial health might not be common terms in Japan, technology products need to solve a problem. Good companies solve a problem. And when they solve a problem, they grow really fast. A lot of people use it. And investors make a lot of money, and the founders make a lot of money, and it's a great story. And in the United States, there's a major problem with the financial services industry. So when I think about fintech, I'm not concerned about. I'm concerned about making sure that the companies that we can help. There's no shortage of companies. We have 1,000 companies that applied for this program, and there's no shortage of really strong entrepreneurs, and there's no shortage of investors. But our goal is to figure out how do we make sure we're providing them the help they need to get to that level. And so it's this this might not be an issue that translates as well, but the underlying, I think, issue does. And so whether it's asset management or wealth management or international repo transactions is the solution, the technology needs to have, it needs to be more than just a technology solving. Okay, it needs to actually improve things. There's an engineering term called FA, just like FU. It's just when there's just a generic, like, it's like a widget. So if you're trying to talk about something, you say, oh, that's just a placeholder word. We're not looking for just kind of like, you know, payments on the internet, wealth management on the internet, credit on the internet. That's not interesting. We're looking about products that use the internet or use tech, blockchain or whatever technology innovation to rethink that product experience and really solve the problem for consumers. I think it's kind of how maybe to think about it. From a practical perspective, your question around like what is low income in the United States? I think we use 2.5 times median income generally, and that depends on what part of the country it's in. So the United States is actually pretty high. I mean, in San Francisco where I live, it's pretty high. San Francisco is a very expensive place. It's like Tokyo, so you know, if you had a family of 4 and you're making $100,000 a year, you'd be in our target where we care about. That would be, you'd be hard pressed to make ends meet on that. But in most parts of the country, it's probably kind of like $40,000 a year and below, $50,000 a year and below is where we're interested in. So we also want products that are solving problems for poor people too. But that's not the primary focus.
少しだけ補足させていただきます。さっき冒頭に申し上げましたように、CFSI という団体は当初、アンバンクと銀行口座を持たない層でありますとか、あるいはアンダーバンクと銀行口座を持っているけれどもそれを十分に使えない、例えばクレジットヒストリーに傷があってローンが組めないとかクレジットカードを使えないという層を、どのように彼らに革新的な金融サービスの提供を通じて彼らの生活を改善するか、そこから始められました。で、これがファイナンシャルインクルージョンなんですけれども、日本語で訳しますと金融包摂ですね。ただ、その後彼らはファイナンシャルヘルスという、金融面での健全性という概念を打ち出します。で、この考え方というのはよりターゲットが広くなるわけですね。先ほどライアンさんが、紹介されたように今アメリカでは年金の問題というのが非常に大きくなっています。結局アメリカの年金システムが、機能していない。その結果退職したらすぐに貧困層に陥る。それまでは働いている間は普通の人だったわけです。ところが退職するといきなり貧困層で金融排除に陥る。では彼らを予防するためにどうすればいいか。結局銀行口座がなくなってしまってからやるのではなく、その以前の予防の段階でファイナンシャルヘルスというものをいかに確保するか、これが重要な課題になるわけですね。で、CFSI は現在そこまでターゲットを広げた形で事業を展開しているということになります。はい、ではご質問をすいません、そちら田中さん。マイクをどうぞ。お名前とご所属を教えてください。
ありがとうございます。いい話を聞かせて。ファイナンシャルインクルージョン研究会の代表をやっております。田中と申します。お話しされたかもしれないんですけど、ちょっとクリアにするために再度お聞きしたいんですけど、先ほどこれらの企業に25万ドルの資金を提供し、合わせてそのコンサルティングをやっているというふうに聞きましたが、この25万ドルというのは、ドネーションなのか、ローンなのか、 インベストメントなのか、その違いをしたい。で、またそれはなぜそういう選択をされておられるのか、ということをお願いします。
Great, thank you. No, that's a very good question. So there's kind of there's 3 questions I heard. Where do we get the money from? How does the money go out the door? And then why? So the money is a grant from JP Morgan Chase. So JP Morgan Chase has a corporate social responsibility set of activities they do, and so they provide CFSI with a grant every year of $5 million, and that supports the cost of the program. I should take just a quick moment to say that pays for this particular program. CFSI is a non-profit, and so apart from this program, we get about 1/3 of our revenue each year from large family foundations, so Ford Foundation, Rockefeller Foundation, those big kind of grantors. We get 1/3 from consulting fees, and then we get about 1/3 from our network fees, which is that 130 financial institution network. They pay us, relatively nominal fees for how big their organizations are, and that pays for that. So this is kind of a stands alone a little bit from the core CFSI, and the money from this particular program is all from JP Morgan Chase, but some CFSI has a much more independent, diverse revenue stream. We deploy the money, so each company receives $250,000 if they're a for-profit company. We will invest in them. We use it's called a convertible note, and it's basically a debt instrument that converts into equity at their next equity financing. If it's a non-profit organization, we also work with non-profits, it's a grant. In addition to that, we provide consulting services ourselves. We also will hire those resource partners to work with the company. So we estimate that each company receives about $330,000 of financial benefit from each year they come from the program. So only $250,000 of its investment. The why on it's a really good question. So initially this was meant to be a prize. And when we started talking to entrepreneurs, it was clear that they would want a grant, everyone wants a grant, once it turned out free money. I don't think they would have applied. Because it's I don't need it. And it a little bit goes to this ecosystem. And I think I used to work in emerging markets before this job. And I don't think this model would work outside the United States. I really don't. It is based on a couple of very big assumptions. One is we have a robust venture capital industry in the United States. We have very clear legal frameworks, contract law. There's a regulatory environment. There's a whole host of things that we don't have to worry about. But the big one is there's a lot of money in the United States to invest in good ideas. And so we knew that if we wanted to have the best businesses, they probably weren't going to be capital constrained. And I think, we use that $140 million follow-on capital number as a bragging thing. Because every accelerator uses that, we have to have it too. But I think most companies will raise the same amount of money with or without us. Maybe a little less. Because they're really good companies. And so what the investment does, and why the investment is really alluring, is it signals to the broader industry a very long-term commitment. If I just gave a grant to a for-profit startup, is he going to be engaged for years and years to come? But with an investment, they kind of have to be.
ただ投資をするということ
it also gives us a better mechanism to manage our reputation.
そして私たちの評判を
So I see my role
うまく
on
マネー
this
しているということ
in
がありま
this
す
at
私
CFSI,
の CFSI の
and much as an investor would.
投資家
and I'm trying to protect the reputational equity of CFSI. So if one of these companies, if Dave, the overdraft company, starts turning into a predatory lender, and I go and say, all right, well, I want my money back, I want to sell it, and I don't care about the economic return, if I go and sell my position, it's worth $1 million for $1, that's a very negative thing I'm going to say about that company. It gives me a tremendous amount of influence over that founder for years down the road. And so by investing in them, you're saying, hey, this is serious. Like, you better actually care about these issues and really be wanting to invest in helping these people. Because if you don't, we're not going to want anything to do with you. And so that same ecosystem of venture capital money that's relatively, it's, people communicate pretty openly and frequently, it works in our advantage kind of both ways. And then the final thing is if we gave a grant to a for-profit startup, we're basically just paying the founder. Grant doesn't seem like a good use of charitable money. Like, might as well the charity make money off of it than anyone else. Why $250,000 is actually a pretty easy question. So we have 5 years. It's about $5 million a year. A little over, about $1.5 million goes to pay for operating expenses at CFSI program. And then we knew we needed it between 8 and 10 companies. We just kind of felt that would be a good number. Felt like if there was less than that, there wouldn't be enough. Like, there wouldn't be enough people to feel. Felt like if there was more than that, it'd be a little crowded. People wouldn't get to know each other. So we divided the amount of money we had, $2.5 million, by 10, $250,000. And also, that's enough money that a team of, say, 4 or 5 people in San Francisco, if they didn't raise any more money, wouldn't run out of money during the program. So it's a risk protection. They don't fail while they're in the program, because that would be embarrassing. But that's about these. There isn't a great logic besides that of why that amount of money.
特に論理的にやったというよりもバランス的に、資金を利用して割とこうなったということなんです。
はい、ありがとうございます。今のお話に少しだけ加えさせていただきますと、先ほど少しライアンさんが紹介されましたが、CFSI はコアイノベーションキャピタルという、投資ファンドを実は作っておられまして、もしもスタートアップが成功すれば、フォローアップとしてこのコアイノベーションキャピタルからのファンドが出るということもあり得ます。それからもう一つ、No? Oh, okay, so just please explain the role of the co-innovation capital.
So we spun out a venture capital fund about five years ago now called Core Innovation Capital. There's no relationship between CFSI and Core.
No. So the co-innovation capital will make a fund investment to the grantees after the program is finished.
They have not yet.
They have not yet?
No.
Oh, sorry, this is misunderstanding. But so how about the JP Morgan? At the end of your program, you will organize a meeting with JP Morgan executives.
Yep.
Yeah, and so is there any chance to get funds from the JP Morgan or other investors?
Again, none of these companies have received any money from JP Morgan Chase.
Okay.
Most of them. So CFSI spun a venture capital fund out several years ago. It's now a completely independent operating entity. So I have a great relationship. We have a great relationship with them, but they make their own investment decisions according to their own investment strategy. We have a couple of companies that actually received money from Core before coming to us.
Before coming to you?
Yes.
I see.
Yes, but we tend to sit kind of in a similar stage. So our more commonly our companies are going on to raise a Series A, and so it's possible Core is certainly a conversant person to talk to, but so far they haven't
すみません、ごめんなさい、今の説明間違えました。コアイノベーションキャピタルというのは完全に独立していて、フォローアップというよりはむしろ、こちらに来る前のシリーズ A のそのラウンドでの投資などをやっているということでした。失礼いたしました。すみません、こちらの方、先に質問でお挙げておられたんですけど、Sorry, sorry, he's waiting.
すみません、ありがとうございます。野村リサーチ&アドバイザリーの長谷川と申します。先ほど来、フィナンシャルソリューションラブ、フィンラブチャレンジも含めですね、いろいろご紹介いただいているんですけれども、今回2017年において、特定のテーマや問題、イシューだとかっていうものを設定されなかった理由があれば教えていただきたいですと。で、ご質問の目的はですね、トークントランジットのような会社が出てきているのに、何か特徴があるのかなと私自身思っていて、でそれがですね、多分これまでそのフィンテックっていうくくりで会社をこう評価する軸みたいなものっていうのが時間の経過とともにちょっと変わってきてるんだろうなと。逆に言うとカテゴライズするとかテーマを絞るとかっていうことが正直難しくなってきてるっていうのが実態としてあるんじゃないかなという私のこう推測があるんですが、それについてまずお聞きしたいということと、あともう一つが今さまざまな問題アメリカでのその金融環境に関する問題についてご指摘されましたけれども、必ずしも日本で同じような問題が出ているわけではないのかなというふうに思うんですね。でその意味で、このアメリカのそのサンフランシスコから見る、もしくはこういった会社さんとのお付き合いの中で見る、日本で、そういったアメリカのスタートアップが展開できる余地、もしくは、ライアンさんが今思われている日本でのその金融環境に関する問題というのはどういうところがあるのかについてちょっと教えていただければと思います。
Sure. So there's kind of, I think, two questions there. One around the theme, and the second question around startups coming to Japan from the United States. Going back to the theme question, it felt a little bit like we were. Well, there is a theme. It's products that improve financial health. I think that it felt like we were kind to split hairs. I don't know if that's an analogy, but you think about technology, then fintech is a relatively small part of the overall technology industry. And then consumer fintech is a part of that. And then within that say, oh, we're only interested in this one narrow niche of it, it was too specific. And it wasn't necessarily helping us get the message out. We would still have companies that were a little bit outside the edge. I mean, part of, I think, what makes the program really powerful is we can bring really great examples. I'm in Japan right now, and these companies don't operate here, and it's still at least somewhat interesting to hear about the businesses. In the United States, this is a very diverse portfolio of companies. And it really helps to make an argument when I'm going and talking to investors about why they should invest in it, or I'm going to talk to an accelerator about why they should pay attention, to say, hey, there's a lot of innovation out there. The broader I'm able to tell a picture, the easier it is to raise additional capital for these companies, think about partnership opportunities, to encourage people to invest in innovation. So it's a little bit in my interest to try to push that, to make that, push the aperture of what consumer fintech is as broad as possible. Within reason. I mean, we don't want products that are serving just rich people. But that's a little bit of why I think we had a theme. It's like, if the more specific it got, it just seemed like we were excluding companies that we really should be working with. It's probably the best answer to that. on the question of like why companies come to Japan, you know, it's interesting. I think Japan is a much harder market to expand to from the United States than some others. I mean, the language issue is probably the biggest driver, honestly. You know, startups are, the United States is already a really big market. In fintech, I am not really positive that you're going to have big global brands in fintech anytime soon. It's just, I mean, it's one regulatory environment in the United States, it's another in the UK, it's another in Canada, and then you got another in Australia. There's 4 English-speaking countries right there with 1 billion people in them. The idea that you're then going to try to go and replicate this in Japan, I think is challenging. You know, Square, I know Japan was one of their first markets that they expanded to. There's certainly exceptions to that. I think Stripe was also kind of in the same boat. But those are pretty far along companies. Companies where we're working with are still pretty early. But I would expect to see more of that in commerce enablement generally, where, you know, people are leveraging the fact that Japan has a very technologically savvy consumer market, you know, leveraging more of the platforms that are out there than, you know, pure consumer products. This is I think a little bit more place-based would be my hypothesis.
May I add some Japanese context? ちょっと私の方からも、日本で今後このフィンテックを活用した金融包摂にどのような可能性があるかということについて、若干補足させていただければと思います。ご承知の通り、7世帯に1世帯が今貧困ラインというのが日本の現状です。政府は、生活困窮者自立支援法を、始めました。でそこでは、家計相談というプログラムを使って貧困層に対して、家計の管理をしながら生活の水準の向上を図るということを始めています。ただ、窓口に来ていただいて相談をしてサポートする、そのコストと逆に受ける側がその時間を費やすことを考えると、膨大なロスになるわけですね。今、ライアンが紹介してくれたいくつかのプログラムはそれをアプリで簡単にサポートしてくれる、そういうアプリがあります。ということは、家計相談一つとってもフィンテックを使えばより安いコストで広範な層にアプローチができる。あるいは今子どもの貧困がいろいろなところで語られています。あまりまだ表面化していませんが、奨学金や、あるいは奨学金が返済できない、学費ローンが返済できなくて大学を卒業するとすぐに債務的な問題が生じ、クレジットヒストリーに傷がついて結局クレジットカードが作れないとかローンが組めないという層が出てきています。これはおそらく今後拡大するでしょう。そうすると今のフィンテックではそういったクレジットヒストリーがない層に対してきちんとお金を貸し、かつクレジット構築をサポートするというシステムも開発されています。これもおそらく今後日本でも真剣に検討すべき課題かと思われます。また先ほどその老人向けの年金の問題というのがありますし、日本でもオレオレ詐欺が流行っていますよね。そういったものの予防策として老人向けのエバーセーフのようなアプリ、これは老人が自分の金融情報を守りながら、信頼できる人にその口座の情報を伝えて、オレオレ詐欺なんかで引っかかった時にそれを予防させるというプログラムですけれども、そういったものも実は可能性があります。このようにおそらく日本でも潜在的には大きなマーケットが存在し、かつそれは単なる福祉ではなくビジネスとしても成立する余地を持っていると思われます。それが今回このセミナー、わざわざ忙しいライアンさんをアメリカからお招きして、セミナーを開催した理由でもあります。はい。 Do you have any comments? で、あと15分あります。で、12時に終わらなければいけませんので、これが最後の質問のラウンドになります。現時点で、ご質問がある方、手を挙げていただいて、でまとめてお伺いした上で、12時までライアンから回答していただくということにしたいと思います。で、一つお一方ですね。はい。
Hi, I'm just wondering if you'd, particularly for financial inclusion, when you come across any solutions companies using blockchain or Bitcoin technology out of the payments, for instance, to reduce the cost of payments.
他に質問、
そういったような使うところを考えておられますか？
できましたらご所属とお名前をお願いいたします。
日本取引所グループの須藤と申します。本日はお時間ありがとうございます。質問は金融配所層のところで証券投資、資産運用だとかそういったことにまつわる課題に関してチャレンジをしている会社がライアンさんの周りであるのかどうかについてご教示いただければと思います。
他にございますか？じゃあこれがおそらく最後になると思いますが
今までの挙げられた例を見るとですね、すでにバンクアカウントを持っていらっしゃる方にいろんなサービスをするというビジネスモデルが多かった。どうぞ小林さんのお話でだいぶ背景は分かったんですけど、もう少し広い範囲で、カバーしようという動きがあるそうですけれども、もともとその金融の困窮者層っていうのはバンクアカウントを持ってないような貧困層に対してもバンクアカウントを持てるようにしたいという目的も初めてあったんだろうと思いますけど、そこら辺の、クレジットヒストリーを調べるにあたって AI だとかいろんなビッグデータを利用してもう少し広い層にバンクアカウントが持てるようにするような技術というのが開発されて
はい、よろしいでしょうか。Okay, we have 15 minutes left, so please take your time.
Great, thanks. So on the blockchain payment side,
But not just payments, generally with blockchain, you think it's a good technology for financial inclusion?
No. Yeah. So I guess from a practical perspective, we don't see as much of that just because we're focused on the U.S. and U.S. consumers. So even if you kind of buy into the crypto story, there isn't as much friction there. I mean, it's a U.S. dollar denominated transaction in the United States. So we just don't see as much. We don't see the international remittance businesses that you'd expect. We do see interesting uses of blockchain without the Bitcoin. Just basically non-relational database technology. But so we have a loan servicer that we invested in last year called Scratch, and they're using that type of technology just because it's the most efficient way to store a lot of just idiosyncratic information. I think it's a stretch to say it's a real blockchain use case though. The best example I've seen was a company that was selling life insurance policies to Mexican migrant workers in California. So California has a large agricultural economy, and there are a lot of seasonal workers who come up from Mexico, work in California farms for a season, and then will end up going back because there's a large seasonal workforce. And dangerous work, they're the main providers for their families. And so there was a startup that we saw that was actually originating life insurance policies in Mexico. And they would use the blockchain to basically do the proof of work for the workers in the United States. So the worker could make a payment, do a micro-insurance product, and have evidence that that policy was actually purchased, so if something happened to them, that it would pay out in Mexico. So that was a really interesting way of kind of getting around some of the regulatory issues of, you typically can't sell an insurance policy in a totally different country than where it's being paid out. But in that case, it makes a lot of sense that someone would actually want a Mexican insurer to pay out on a Mexican life to a Mexican beneficiary, even if that person died in the United States. So that I think it's the best use case we've seen where there's a serious socioeconomic impact from it. I think a lot of the blockchain stuff, I'm a big skeptic on it, which is always dangerous to be. But it just doesn't have, payments aren't that complicated. There isn't that much friction in payments. I think it's mostly a Ponzi scheme. So.
Don't you see disenfranchised groups paying too much for payment processors, or do you think it's sort of fair and not much fat to take out?
I'm not sure putting them on a super complex, highly somewhat at-risk platform where there's a decent amount of fraud and theft is a great idea either. I agree there's a lot of inefficiencies in the payments networks, but I think it needs a ways to go. I haven't been impressed by the development of the industry in the 5 years that I've been working on this. So far, you just don't see that much that's actually got a consumer end game. And a lot of stuff still is very much about profiting off of the perceived value of the currency. So, on the asset management security side of things, we've got a couple that are worth flagging. The best example is a company called Wise Banyan, which was a robo-advisor that we had in our second class. They're still around. They're based out of New York. They actually built their own clearing and settlement firm so that they could have control over basically almost the entire transaction and drive a lot of costs out of it. Grove in this class might kind of move in that direction a little bit. We tend to kind of look away. We've tried to I think we intentionally avoid asset under management type of businesses. I think it's a little bit of a value trap from an equity investment perspective. So if if you're accumulating assets and you're valuing these companies in the very early stages on their growth, and so you can have this really stratospheric growth and you can treat it like a software company. But I think what happens is once you get to a certain asset size, the growth investors, the more sophisticated financial investors that tend to write those checks, look at it and say, well, BlackRock's got $1 trillion under management and trades at a 0.1 equity valuation to that, so why would I pay 15 times 8 assets under management for this other company? So I think when we look at those plays, I want to see a subscription play, usually like a SaaS, more of a SaaS business model. Wise Banyan's interesting because they try to basically break out all the potential products that someone could pay for. So for Wise Banyan, they have this goal-based product, and it's free to set a goal, but then they'll charge you for like tax loss harvesting. They'll charge a couple basis points for something like that. They'll charge you a fee to help kind of set up an automated kind of goal management platform. They'll make money from referrals out. I mentioned a lot of people are using that to save for a home. Well, if you have a customer with great credit, $30,000 saved in Wise Banyan, that's a pretty valuable lead to a potential lender. And so they're able to kind of make money off of some of those business models. Grove is a kind of a is kind of trying to be like a financial planner, but for more longer term financial planning, and they're going to go with like an annual subscription fee. And so, by decoupling the assets from the service, I think you end up with, better business models, and is more likely for a refocus on a lower income consumer, more likely to be something that you're going to benefit them. Because if I'm just going to do asset under management, you're just going to end up with everybody going to the richest person they can find. And then so your question was kind of twofold, one on the bank account piece, and then on kind of AI and big data. So on the bank account, I don't think we would say that we shifted away from really more people. I mean, a couple of things have happened. One, there's a lot of people that got bank accounts in the United States, so you don't have as many people who are unbanked as you did 15 years ago. I think those rates, that's been cut in half. I think you were looking at probably, I think at the end of in 1999, it was 80% of people had a bank account, and now I think it's in the low 90s. So you've seen bank accounts. There's been a lot there. There's also been a lot on non-bank transaction accounts. So prepaid cards are quite common in the United States, and that's also helped to bridge the gap, and those function pretty close to a bank account. And so I think, there's one reason. I mean, that's just not as salient of an issue for many providers. That last 5-10% is going to be very difficult to bring on. You end up with very rural communities, where there's no banks. I spoke at a group of Native Americans a few months ago, and that's a population where there are no banks. So they're desperate to find ways to bring any financial product to those populations. You have a lot of consumers who are they can't manage a checking account. There is some credit risk associated with them. Someone can overdraw an account and never pay the bank back. It's hard to argue that for those people. That's going to always be a problem. And then you do have big areas of the country, especially in the South, and some of the very rural areas where there just aren't banks. So I think you'll always have some of that. I think the bigger reason from our shift though is really about having an issue that responds to the needs people have. I mean, if we focus on underbanked and unbanked consumers, and you just ignore the entire financial crisis in the United States, all those people had bank accounts, and they all had credit, and they had devastating consequences because it wasn't a good product. And so I think that's where our shift is really about the product piece of it. And I'm happy to talk more at length about it afterwards. It's certainly a question that we've gotten before, we spent a lot of thinking about. I would say that this is a very helpful way of talking about a broad problem. Our focus is definitely on kind of low and moderate income Americans. I think that's something that's worth keeping in mind. I'm probably on the furthest end of that, the moderate income, because I'm investing in startups. So you just see more activity here, and my goal is to try to bring them down market. But as an organization, the focus this is probably the top end of our focus. On AI and big data, we see a lot of it. A huge amount. Nova is probably our best example. So in the United States, there are about 30 million Americans who do not have a credit file, called no-file consumers. 10 million of them are recent immigrants. So that can be highly skilled workers, it can be lower skilled workers. But if anyone in this room who has credit in Japan came to the United States, it is highly unlikely you would qualify for a credit card or mortgage or any other credit product because your credit history is here in Japan. And so what Nova does is goes and buys these credit histories in other markets and then works with banks in the United States to port that credit data into their own originating table. So if you showed up at Wells Fargo in San Francisco, they would say, instead of saying, who is this guy, we've never heard of him before, they'd be able to pull on your lifetime of credit history, your assets. Japan say, actually, this guy's a great credit risk. And so the amount of data that they're having to analyze and crunch and just keep secure is impressive for how big that is. And you know, this is one where when I go and talk to banks, which have a lot of highly skilled foreign workers, H-1B visa holders, people who are coming to the United States to work with technology, I'll get a whole room full of people being like, yeah, like, that's a great product, we need that. So you see a lot of companies that are thinking about like leveraging larger data sets, harnessing them. And then a lot of companies that use that data coupled with kind of behavioral insights to try to kind of find the consumers who they think are kind of on the upswing. And that's one of the other big kind of trends that we see across the board is a lot of products where a lot of the credit markets treat somebody's point in time as in perpetuity. So if I have a 600 credit score today, I will always get a credit score. If I have an 800 credit score today, I will always get a credit score. The credit scores are actually highly volatile. And so there's a lot of companies out there that are saying, well, I can predict who's coming up and who's going down. And that's a big area we see a lot of activity in.
はい、どうもありがとうございました。長時間にわたり、本日のセミナーにお付き合いいただきまして誠にありがとうございます。私どもソーシャルファイナンス研究会は完全にボランティアでやっております。実は今日受付していただいていた川原さんと渡瀬さんも Facebook 上でボランティアを募って駆けつけていただいたということでございます。そういう状況ではありますけれども、この金融包摂も含めまして、今後も活動しておりますので、もし今回のセミナーで何かご質問等がありましたら、お配りした資料の最後に、ソーシャルファイナンス研究会の事務局の連絡先を、記載しております。こちらを、遠慮なくご連絡いただければ私が、できる範囲で回答させていただきます。最後になりましたが、正直申し上げて私は10人ぐらいのオーディエンスでやるのかなと思っておりましたら、予想を超えて30人以上の方々に来ていただきました。このような貴重な機会を、設けていただきました、金融庁日経新聞、それからフィンテック協会、この主催団体の方々に御礼申し上げます。本日はどうもありがとうございました。最後にアメリカからハードハルバーが来ていただきました。